So you've yelled at your kids and you feel bad for it. We've all been there. And today I've got some strategies and some ideas, a little shift in perspective that may help you as you move along your parenting journey. But before we go there, I just want to say one thing. I want you to give yourself some grace. Again, we've all been there. And for one thing, you're here. You're sitting there on your computer, on your phone, you're on YouTube, and you've typed in, how can I stop yelling at my kids? And just by doing that, you're demonstrating that you do have that growth mindset. You're trying to better yourself. You want to be better tomorrow than you were today. And I just want to fully acknowledge you for that because that's critical. That's the first step. And without that first step, there's no hope for tomorrow being better than today. So again, I just want to acknowledge you for that. But let's go ahead and jump into some ideas for you that are going to help you to move forward and hopefully reduce, if not completely eliminate, that whole process of yelling at your kids. Well, hello again, everyone. My name is Jim White. I'm an author, coach, and the founder of the Family Enrichment Academy. And today we're going to be talking about yelling at your kids, and I'm going to give you some ideas or strategies for how to stop doing that or at least reduce the amount of times that you do it. But before we go there, I wanted to let you know I do have a free resource for you. It's 10 things you need to stop doing as a parent, and then what you can do instead. And you can find this at our website, FamilyEnrichmentAcademy.com. So be sure to go there and check that out. And actually, we're talking about don't yell at your kids. It's not on the list, but it's some other stuff like that. So definitely you may be interested. So let's dive into some of the strategies and ideas that I wanted to share with you around yelling at your kids. So let's start off with a little pre-work. And what I mean by pre-work is I want you to start to develop some self-awareness around the circumstances or issues that have you start to become frustrated or angry, which in turn lead to you yelling to your child. So what is it? What are the common ones that pop up? Maybe they don't clean their room. That's an example I know I've heard from parents before. And what I want to point to here is it's typically some kind of an expectation or belief that's been violated by the child that causes you to start to feel that anger or frustration. And again, that anger or frustration leads to the yelling. But it all starts with that violation of that expectation or belief. So one of the things I want you to do, where we're going to start, is have some awareness about what are those situations or circumstances that cause that to happen. So now that you have one or two of those circumstances or situations that pop up in your mind, I want you to think for a minute about how maybe you could look at that differently. So the question is, how could I look at this differently? Or even how could this be a good thing? What pops up in your head? Now I'm going to give you something to think about along these lines as well. I want you to think in terms of any bad or unwanted behavior, them violating that rule or that expectation, any of that unwanted behavior is really just a cry for help. So if you take that look, how does that shift the way you feel? Instead of it being frustrated, maybe you feel a little compassion on the other side. So this shifting of your perspective around that event can have a big impact on how you respond to that event. And my goal is to have you move from that fearful mindset into more of a love-based mindset. So let me say again, how could this particular situation be a situation where they're just calling out to you and it's a cry for help? What could be going on? What's underneath it all? Maybe start thinking about it. Are they overwhelmed at school potentially? Is that part of what's causing them to act in an inappropriate way? Or potentially could their best friend, maybe they just moved away to another school district. And again, that stressor is causing some issues for them. So my point is I want you to put on that compassionate hat a little bit and see if you can look at this situation from a different perspective, which will then allow you to respond in a different way. You won't move to that anger or frustration, which leads to the yelling. So now let's move on. Let's move on to the moment where you start to feel that frustration come up or that anger come up, and you're maybe getting ready to start into that yelling. Now the reason we did that pre-work is I wanted you to do that while you're composed, so you have a chance to, I'll say, think more logically, if you will, without that emotion, so you can have those thoughts already there in your head. Again, those compassionate thoughts. So here's what I'm going to suggest. When you have that moment, and you start to feel it come on, again, it's self-awareness. Just be aware of when that anger or frustration is starting. You know that trigger event happens. That should be an awareness alert, right? Okay, oops, I gotta be careful that I don't slip into the frustration and anger. And then if you start to feel that anger or frustration coming up, just try to create a pause. Create that pause just for a moment, because then the strategy I want to give to you is a 3-question strategy that I want you to ask yourself in that pause. So the first question is, how can I bring forgiveness or compassion into this? So you can see how I'm kind of referring back to that pre-work. Hopefully you can bring back some of those thoughts and say, how can I be and see this situation from more of a compassionate perspective? So that's question number 1. Question number 2 to ask yourself is, how can I bring gratitude to this situation, or how could this be a good thing? So again, we're going to be referring back a little bit to that pre-work, or you may see something new in the moment. But again, this is happening in the moment. So now you've made that shift, and hopefully you feel a little bit more grounded in compassion and forgiveness at this point. And then the final question, this is the big one too, which is, what can I do right now to make a difference? What can I do to make a difference? That's the alternative to the yelling. And so ask yourself that question and just see what comes up. And whatever comes up, I encourage you to act upon it. Do whatever comes up for you. That's the 3-question little system I want to give you in the moment to help you in that moment. Create the pause, ask yourself those 3 questions, see what comes up, see how you feel differently, and then act upon whatever comes up on that final question. How can I make a difference? Now, one other thing before we wrap up, and that is that sometimes this may not go well, right? You may slip in and yell at your child. But I want to encourage you, these 3 questions, you can use them after the fact as well. So let's say you had an incident, you forgot, you didn't create the pause, and you went into a yell, you ended up yelling at your child. Circle back, ask those 3 questions when you've got your composure again. How can I look at this differently? How can I bring compassion or forgiveness? What am I grateful for? Then ask the question, how can I make a difference now? Even though it's after the fact, what could you do now to help rebuild or reestablish some relationship with your child? So you can use those 3 questions even after the fact also. And a lot of times in the beginning, that's what you end up doing, because you just don't have the habit of walking through that in the moment, when you're feeling that overwhelm. So circle back to them, ask them after the fact, and then you just really got to act on whatever comes up, at the end when you say, how can I make a difference? Whatever pops in your head, that action, just be sure to follow through and act on it. So to wrap up, let me just summarize what we've talked about. That first big shift in mindset was around the idea that any of this bad or unwanted behavior, the stuff that sets you off and gets you frustrated or angry and leads to that yelling, think in terms of that unwanted behavior is really a cry for help. This will help you to take on more of a compassionate approach with them. And then the other key thing is those 3 questions. What do I need to forgive, or how can I see this from compassionate eyes? Then what am I grateful for? How could this be a good thing? And then finally, how can I make a difference? Use those questions to shift that perspective and help move you away from yelling to actually contributing and making a difference with your child. Give it a try. Before we wrap up though, I did want to remind you, I do have those 10 things you need to stop doing as a parent and what you can do instead. And you can find those at the website, FamilyEnrichmentAcademy.com. So be sure to check those out as well. Once again, it is truly an honor to be here and serve and support you as you move along your parenting journey. And once again, I just want to acknowledge you for having that growth mindset. That growth mindset is just critical to moving along this journey and being better tomorrow than you are today, which is the whole goal. Until next time, remember, a change in perspective changes everything.